Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sathology Debunking Mythology. Today we're going to cover the Purva Paksha on Bharat and Savitri. A lot of misconceptions over there. And so we are doing this Purva Paksha series so that you understand how to analyze the historical records through philosophical research. We are not doing any blind research. Blind research means that we start from our mind and go crazy. That's mental speculation. So it has only one outcome, that is depression. And so when you do philosophical research, the outcome is Atmaranjan, self-enjoyment. So, but if you do mental speculation, the outcome is craziness, mental craziness. So not only are you going to misguide yourself, you're going to misguide others. Plus, you're going to create utpata eva kalpate. You're going to create utpat, will complete confusion in the society, which is again following Max Muller and Macaulay. So we don't want to be Max Muller and Macaulay because those guys did not understand Sanskrit. They had ulterior objectives, and they misguided a whole group of people. That's called utpat. So in these discussions, Nilesh ji and I, mainly Nilesh ji, is showing how to do Purva Paksha, or a scientific philosophical inquiry. So without delay, let us welcome a great friend, Rishi Muni, whatever you call him, researcher, modern term, Shri Nilesh Nilkant Oak.
Namaskar, Aditya ji.
Namaskar.
And what was the term that you used? One is a philosophical research that takes us to Atmaranjan. And what is the opposite of that?
Mental speculation.
Mental speculation. And the sage Patanjali, in his Yoga Sutra, he gives a very good definition of mental speculation. The sutra has this beauty, like just few words. In fact, it has a definition, that it should be only few words, no superfluous stuff. And essentially, it is a summary of a long discourse, conversation between guru and a shishya. At the end of it, just like we give a title to our talk, we might say Purva Paksha number 5 and something like this. It is like that. It is essentially a summary in a very concise form. That's a sutra. And the Patanjali in his Samadhipad, he uses this sutra. I think it's number 9. It says Shabda Jnananupati Vastu Shunya Vikalpa.
Vikalpa.
So Shabdadnyan, only Shabdadnyan, mental speculation. It is not backed by any evidence. And it leads to confusion, delusion, confusion of yourself. Just like you said, Atmaranjan, confusion of yourself, but worse, confusion of others.
Utpata.
Really utpata, correct.
And you put a very nice word on sutra description. So many people, when they tell me they're going to understand Veda from Vedanta Sutra, so Vedanta Sutra is meant for remembering Veda, because to remember Veda, you need to understand. So Vedanta Sutra is the formulas.
Yes.
So it has got a lot of secrets inside it.
Correct.
So unless you have read Veda, Vedanta Sutra will not make sense. But people who have mastered Veda, even small part of it also, but for them relevant sections of Vedanta Sutra makes them remember every single aspect of it.
Right.
So
and essence of the Vedas. For example, in Vedanta Sutra, if you take, say, number 4, like Tattu Samanvaya.
Correct.
Like you have to do Samanvay, bring it together, which is to say what? Understand everything in the context. So if you just blindly look at Vedas or any text, modern text, secular text, religious text, you will always find it confusing. But in the context, you may able to make sense out of it. Why somebody might be saying this. In fact, it applies to our Purva Paksha also. Right. Because when we do Purva Paksha, we are brutally criticizing a certain claim. But before we do that, we actually try to say that claim from that person's point of view. Okay. And why he or she might have reached that conclusion.
Right.
And then we also go back and show why that is not correct, assuming that is the case.
Right.
And Purvapaksha doesn't always means to show that it is not correct. In some cases, we may do the Purvapaksha and we will actually identify the correct things out of that.
Right.
Saying this is valid. I mean, if you remember some of what is this number 4 or 5 right now we are doing.
Yeah.
In the previous one, when a certain researcher has done some good work, we acknowledge it. We're saying here he or she is right. Okay. And so that is Tattu Samanvaya, to show what is correct, but also to point out what is wrong with no anger or with no, what you say, trying to put the emotion, no emotions, not trying to put down that person, but in the search of truth to point it out fearlessly. And that is a Daivi Prakriti, Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhir, and also with humbleness.
Right.
And that is what Purvapaksha is.
Yeah, arrogantly trying to put others down, that is not philosophical research or speculation also. That is mental speculation. But here we are doing an intelligent analysis so you can understand, people can understand that, yes, this is the point being discussed and this is why it is wrong. These are the evidences for it, and makes it more relevant and educative. Otherwise, it just remains like Vad Vida Ved Vad Rataha. It all becomes a useless exercise pretty much. So let's get started today, and in the spirit of this, so that people understand it and use this methodology for their own purpose.
Yes. And that is a great point, Aditya ji. It is what we are discussing. Yes, we are, as a intuition engine, we are using Mahabharata claims, different Mahabharata claims for the dating of the Mahabharata war. However, it's very important to emphasize that if people follow these discussions, they will able to pick up methodologies that they can apply anywhere. In fact, reading any research book, any novel, anything, any claim in any disciplines, anywhere in life, So somebody says something, says, if you do this, this will happen. And here is why. And, you can start analyzing it using some of the tools that we are sharing, we are discussing in this particular discussion. So I will start sharing it.
You made a very good matrix. Actually, you have been showing in all those things. And I think that's a very conclusive way. And you developed that methodology very unique. I think it's a copyright belongs to you. Because it's your own work, original.
Which one is that? The 4 quadrants?
The 4 quadrants, yeah. 4 quadrants.
Right. Well, correct. What happens is these frameworks help yourself visualize the point better.
Right.
It also helps communicate the point better, right, to others. And, this is not, this particular framework is my creation, but the concept of a framework is very, very old. In fact, we just talked about the sutra, like Yoga Sutra and all. These are nothing but frameworks, right?
Yes.
I mean, you can take one sutra and meditate on that for a long time.
For a long time.
Same thing with the frameworks, like the one visual one I show. Actually, you can meditate and you can keep on going into it. In fact, the beauty is, and when we get to the framework, we'll talk about it. Okay, so today what we are going to discuss, again, the Purvapaksha, and related to the dating of the Mahabharata war. If Aditya ji, you remember, and if our viewers remember, some time ago, we discussed a claim of one individual named Nilakantha Chaturdhar from 400 years ago, from 17th century. And that time I mentioned, and I should admit my error, I said this is the oldest claim related to the dating of the Mahabharata war. That's not quite correct. In fact, what I'm going to discuss today is one of the oldest, and definitely older than the one of Nilakantha Chaturdhar. Now, this time, if you notice, I'm being very careful. I'm not saying this is the oldest because I may run into something else as I think more about it, and I might come across something else. But this is definitely one of the very old claim. And when we get into the details of it, we will definitely discuss some aspects. This claim is not for the specific year of the Mahabharata war. which is very similar to what Nilakantha Chaturdhar had done. In some ways, Nilakantha Chaturdhar, by doing a certain interpretation, he did point to a specific time period. I don't think he necessarily realized it, but he did point towards a specific time period. This one is also a pointing towards a specific time period based on what it is claiming. Okay, and we might have to do this in a couple of parts, but I can give away the first answer, which is to say this claim is wrong, but something very interesting about it. See, the right and wrong, those are very easy things to decide. If we apply the scientific method, if we apply the logical reasoning, if we apply the background knowledge, common sense, and if our search is truly for the truth, it doesn't take much to separate the grains from the chaff. But the value of what I'm going to show you today, this particular claim, is tremendous. Okay. And the another theme you will find is through this act of Purva Paksha, while we may be discussing a specific claim, we are actually going to expose much of the rot that has happened in the dating of this Mahabharata war business over last 400 years, but possibly even longer. Now, this rot may be deliberate, it may not be deliberate. We will also talk about the reasons why people make errors, including ourselves. I mean, we all are prone to make errors. That is given. So let's talk about this so-called claim of a Bharat Savitri. Now, where does this claim fit along this timeline? Bharat Savitri itself is not claiming any specific year. So in that sense, it does not fit anywhere on this range of Mahabharata claims, which go from 400 CE, only 1600 years ago. Sir, Dr. Hopkins of Harvard University. And if you look at the 200 BC, that is like Professor Sheldon Pollock of Columbia, and most of the Indology researchers in the Western world, and I would say their lack is in India. But this particular claim, although it is not claiming anything by itself, just as a reference point to you, I'm going to say that it does fit into what we have discussed in the past, which is to say, last two episodes, we discussed the 1793 BC claim of Dr. Ashok Bhatnagar, which was 1793. So it fell into this third bucket from the left, like between 1600 BC to 2500 BC. Then before that, we did the Purva Paksha of a recent article written by Dr. Konrad Elst. And he doesn't have his own claim. So he was not claiming a specific year. However, he was insisting that the Mahabharata war can be only claimed between like a 1000 BC here to 2000 BC. Okay. Today's claim, although not officially claimed in the Bharat Savitri text itself, refers to that time frame. And today we may have a time to go that far. We may not have a time to go that far. Then, of course, the other claims, so we will not discuss those. Before we get into some technical aspects of Bharat Savitri and specific verses, why this text is very important and how this text shows one of the very oldest attempt to understand the historicity of a Mahabharata, if not the oldest, at least as far as what we have found in terms of textual literature, this is the oldest. But now, as I said, I'm going to be very careful because some time ago I said Nilakantha Chaturdhar is oldest and it's not. Okay. So what is Bharat Savitri? Bharat Savitri is a supplement to a supplement. Okay. It is a supplement to a text known as Harivamsha, which in turn is a supplement as an appendix. It's called Khila Parva to the Mahabharata text. So the generic story that number of you would have heard, and if you have not heard, this is the connection between Mahabharata and Harivamsha and possibly Bharat Savitri. So after the Mahabharata text was written, Vyasadeva and of course his disciples and his team, you can say editorial team, It felt that the Krishna's character was mentioned in a sufficient detail in the Mahabharata text, but only as it relates to the events of the Mahabharata war. So there, the Kauravas and Pandavas, the Kuru dynasty, and their internal family struggle is the main thing. And only to the extent anyone is connected with that struggle, to that extent everyone is described, and Bhagwan Krishna is no exception. So Vyasadeva, and of course his editorial team, I'm just using this for a reason, they felt that there is a lot more that we need to document about Krishna and Krishna's dynasty. That is how the word Hari Vangsha, Hari as in Krishna, and Vangsha is his genealogy, his dynasty. So that's why this Hari Vangsha came into being. Aditya ji can talk more about, so Aditya ji, let me ask you that question then. Just like I briefly mentioned about Hari Vangsha, do you like to take a couple of minutes and mention what was the cause behind the composition of the Srimad Bhagavad Puran?
Great question. We mentioned in the beginning Vedanta Sutra, like a simple aphorisms, like a one-liners, like Patanjali Sutra to describe yoga incompletely. But you have to, if you do not have Patanjali Sutra, it's very difficult to understand yoga completely. So he became the authority on Yoga Sutra, which he wrote. Similarly, Vedanta Sutra is the summary of Veda, all the four Veda. So if anyone who is learned in Veda and wants to remember, it's easy to reference Vedanta Sutra, and then he can remember the context in which it was being spoken. Similarly, so to understand Vedanta Sutra, very difficult. So Narad Muni instructed Vyasa to write a commentary on Vedanta Sutra with the help of Purana, because we all love gossip, we all love soap opera
and stories. Yes.
And stories.
Yes.
So Veda, and also he instructed, because you have written all about Karma Kanda, so people will be naturally inclined to do worldly activities without understanding the purpose of life. So he collected all the stories of Purana which are related to Vishnu or Hari, who can give mukti. So Brahma Sutra is also sometimes Srimad Bhagavatam is also called Brahma Sutra. It's the natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra from the perspective of Narad Muni, so that people can get mukti out of this cycle, and with the beautiful stories. So Bhagavad Puran will have Ramayana also, will have Prithu Maharaj, will have all Krishna, entire Krishna Leela is described over there in the 10th canto.
Right.
And the Kali Yuga descriptions are there, Purana, who created Purana. So all those histories are there, but the ultimate purpose is so that people surrender to Vishnu or Hari.
Right.
So therefore it's also called Amala Purana, spotless Purana.
Spotless Purana.
But so you will see more bhakti point over there.
Very good, very good. Yeah, so here Hari Vangsha is a genealogy in terms of, again, documenting additional details. There it is about the bhakti.
Yeah.
And Bharat Savitri, one may think of it like this. It is one of the first attempts, if not the first attempt, one of the first attempts to document from the historical perspective Mahabharata. No, Mahabharata itself is a itihasa. So why there is a need for it? Well, somebody, again, and we'll talk about this briefly, we don't know exactly who composed Bharat Savitri. When it was composed, we don't know. But just from the attempt, if you read it, it gives you a feeling that someone was trying to summarize it based on that person's understanding of Mahabharata. And I'm going to show you something very interesting, which is what we find many times, unfortunately, among our many current Mahabharata researchers. One of the thing I complain about them, and it's not a complaint, but it's a fact, is that majority, and when I say majority, honestly, I'm saying 99% plus, do not bother to read Mahabharata text, or if they read it, they exclude the stuff that will become dangerous for their claim. Okay, so let's go with this, and I'll show you what that Bharat Savitri is holding. Okay, it's a supplement to Hari Vangsha. very small actually compared to the size of Mahabharata or Harivansh itself. It can be thought of as a Sakala Bharata Upa Samvara Bhuta. Okay, Samvara Bhuta, for meant for the conclusion. So it's a concluding and evocative supplement. It's definitely after a while, after the Mahabharata was composed and after the Harivansha was composed. And I'll tell you why I say that. But let's go on. Now, the number of you would be familiar with the critical edition that was created by the whole Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute. It was such a huge project. It actually took place over a few generations, like 50, 60 plus years it took to complete that project, the whole project. And one of the key individual who actually began that project, Dr. V.S. Suktankar, he quotes only 2 verses from the Bharat Savitri, okay, in terms of quoting the essence of it. But how big is Bharat Savitri? It's not very big, but definitely not 2 verses. Bharat Savitri is about 100 shloka, okay? And as I already said, the dating of Bharat Savitri composition as to when it was done and who did it is, unfortunately, that information is lost. If we had this information, we would have found even the information more useful. We would have known people's assumptions about the historicity of Mahabharata, some of the details, and we would have known when those details got twisted in some fashion. Okay. Now, quickly, because I'm showing this framework, where does that Bharat Savitri fits? First thing is not making a specific explicit claim for the year of Mahabharata war. So naturally, the top right-hand corner or bottom left-hand corner is just gone. Okay. In the sense of it's not making a specific claim. Now, so does it fall into this in the sense of, is there a priori bias? I like to think possibly there is a priori bias, but I do not think that the idea behind Bharat Savitri was to create a populist image. The reason I say that is because whoever that individual who composed it, if he wanted or she wanted to preserve the populist image or create a populist image, the person would have bothered to state one's name and it's just not been done. So we don't know what that is, unless the Savitri Bharat is named in some fashion. Okay, I don't think so based on what I know about it. And also, is this a rigorous critique of existing claims? No, it's not. So in that sense, it truly doesn't fit anywhere. But however, as I said, that the way the evidence is stated, it will fit into that 1000 BC to 2000 BC based on the references that are mentioned. And something very interesting I'm going to tell you about those references. Many of the Mahabharata researchers who today get into the trouble by not bothering to read Mahabharata and quickly trying to jump to a conclusion because of their hurry to be in the limelight, it might find its roots in a Bharat Savitri. And therefore, I thought of doing a Purva-Paksha on this. So let's go further. So as I said, Bharat Savitri is 100 shloka in length. And just to not make multiple slides, I just took first few shloka and the last few shloka. So you can see the numbers going from 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in between, of course, all those additional verses, 92 or whatever those number is, and then last 3 verses of Bharat Savitri. So it refers to, now why do I say that it is written after some significant time? It's a directional speculation. I mean, there's no exact sharp evidence, but you can see that even the Vyasa is deified. Okay, I mean, Vyasa was recognized as something special right during his time, just like Krishna was recognized as a divinity, right during his time. But here you will even see Vyasaya Vishnu Rupaya, Vyasa Rupaya Vishnave, how they are one. Okay, that sort of language. So that gives you something. And then last one, like number of you and Aditya of course would know, but sometimes you make a summary shloka, that covers the whole Mahabharata, that covers the whole Ramayana. For example, Ramayanam, Aditya, I don't know if you know the beginning verse of that, but I know somewhere in between, right now it's just coming to me. It's like, Vaidehi Haranam Jata Yumaranam Sugriva Sambhashanam Vali Nirdalanam Samudra Taranam Lanka Puri Dahanam Paschad Ravana Kumbhakarna Hananam Etadviramayanam. So just like in few verses, you give a whole summary of it. You see such summary as the last shlok of Bharat Savitri. So this is saying Ado Pandava Dharta Rashtra Jananam Laksha Gruhe Dahanam Dyutam Sri Haranam Vane Viharanam Matsyalaye Vartanam. This is the 13th year when they were in a Virata's place. Leela Go Grahanam Rane Viharanam Sandhi Kriya Jrubhanam Paschad Bhishma Suyodhana Adi Nidhanam Yetad Mahabharatam. Okay, so in just 4 lines, in a very efficient way, it is a summary of Mahabharata. So in that sense, wherever the text was written has its value. Now we'll get into the dating aspect of it. Out of these 100 verses, I am pulling specifically few verses. Now, before that, number of verses will match with what we know about Mahabharata. For example, it will mention 18 Parvas, it will mention different kings, 18 Aukshahini warriors, and all that it mentions very similar to Mahabharata. Something very interesting though. Here it is talking about the first day of the Mahabharata war. It says, Hemante Prathame Mase Shukla Pakshe Trayodashi Pravrittam Bharatam Yuddham Nakshatram Yamadaivatam. Okay, so for example, now which one is the Yamadaivatam? So Nakshatra is the first day Nakshatra, or Nakshatra of the first day of the Mahabharata war is mentioned here. It is says Yamadaivatam. Aditya, I don't want to put you on the spot. I will give you the answer. Does it give you a hint what it might be?
Yes.
What is it?
Shani.
So Yamadaivatam, that's why you are saying Shani, right? It is a Bharani Nakshatra.
Bharani Nakshatra, correct.
Right? Excellent. So because the Devata is a Yama and something like this, you know.
And now what is Trayodashi?
Now yes. What does the who are you reminded of? you have these people, these Mahabharata researchers on your show, by the way. Yeah. So Shukla Paksha Trayodashi, the war beginning. So now one of the traditional thinking is what? It began on the Ekadashi day,
Margashira correct.
Ekadashi, right?
Yes.
That is one. But here it is not saying Margashira Shukla Ekadashi. Now, I have shown why it is not Margashira Shukla Ekadashi, but it has to be Kartika Amavasya. But we're not going to that today. But here it is claiming Shukla Paksha Trayodashi. Does somebody come to your mind?
Yes, some people.
Who is that? No, I will say it. I will say it. So no onus on you. And it's not done for any reason.
And also Hemante Prathame Mase, which is also very important.
Very important.
Because Hemanta Prathame Mase Shukla Paksha Trayodashi. So this whole line has to be taken together.
And do you know what has happened? See, right, and that is why this one is very important. Like some of the roots of the problems of many Mahabharata researchers, why they go haywire and come up with all kinds of crazy dates without giving any importance or without bothering to know the evidence of original Mahabharata text, is because of, I don't want to blame it on Bharat Savitri, but because of things like this. And I'm glad you pointed out Hemanta Prathame Mase. So we know that the Hemanta Rutu is what? Hemanta Rutu begins 60 days before the day of winter solstice.
Correct.
Before the day of Uttarayan.
Yes.
So just as a hypothetical case, the most extreme positive scenario we can consider, let us say the Shukla Paksha Trayodashi is the first day of the Hemanta Rutu.
Correct.
Now do the interesting math. From that day, Shukla Paksha Trayodashi, so now the 10 days has to go by before Bhishma falls in the battle.
Yes.
And actually it says here, Bhishma, when Bhishma is falling, he says, Krishna Pakshecha Saptami.
Saptami.
Okay. So 10 days of the Hemanta Rutu are gone. So out of 60 days, 10 days are gone. And now Bhishma fell in the battle.
Yes.
Now tell me, to the day of winter solstice, how many days he has left? Out of 60, 10 are gone. So only 50 days are
left.
Right?
Yes.
Now that will not match with the 58-day assumption. It's erroneous, but it is made by almost 90% plus of Mahabharata researchers. They will
Krishna
not.
Paksha Saptami means 57th day actually.
Correct, right? But I'm saying we can give a benefit of doubt for 1 ± 1 day with a tithi,
Yeah.
like tithi can
No, it's
get
actually 52 days, 56 days actually total.
uh, actually it will be 50. Why? How 56?
No, the actually it should be 50, but I'm saying Krishna Paksha Saptami.
Yeah.
So again, your 6 days have passed after the
Huh.
Krishna Paksha.
Huh. No, but what I'm saying is, therefore, you will not get 58 days.
Correct. You'll not get
Okay?
58 days.
You will
yes.
not even get the minimum 58 days that are claimed by people.
No, you won't get it.
Okay. And now it is saying
It should be less than that.
Now I mean, today that is not the objective. In fact, we will spend good time doing a Purva Paksha of the claim of Professor K.S. Raghavan, claim of Professor Narari HR, and also Dr. Manish Pandit. Not that it needs to be done, but essentially, I don't know, by the way. So it is up to them. It is for them to explain. Is this worse, or is this worse that confuse them? I mean, they can use this as an excuse for their confusion if they want to. But here is the problem. Even with this verse, you cannot explain 58 days. Even 58 is wrong, but even that cannot be explained because only you are left with is a 50 days.
Yes.
Okay. Then what is the problem? The other problem is that Shukla Paksha Trayodasi, that claim goes against the entire evidence of the Mahabharata text for the 18 days of the war.
Right.
Okay, because you see no descriptions of the moon at all for the first 7 days of the war.
Right.
Then 8, 9, 10, 11 you have descriptions of the moon, and from the 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 descriptions of the full moon, including even the day 19. Okay, so that is a very solid evidence. We also have a evidence of the timing of the Mahabharata war to be that of Sharad season. Why Sharad season? In fact, not the end of Sharad season, the beginning of a Sharad season. And that can be validated again by the 92 plus days of Bhishma on the bed of arrows.
Correct.
So from the day of winter solstice, you are going 92 days. Okay. So you are going first 60 days, Hemant Rutu is gone. You're going backwards. Another 30 days, the second month of Sharad Rutu is gone. You are still left with 2 days. And that 2 days can only be the 10th day of the war. So the Mahabharata war, out of 18 days, at least definitely 12 days are taking place in the first month of Sharad season. Right. So that such a deep and rich evidence of the Mahabharata text is conflicting. So therefore, I wanted to show this. And therefore, I said we may not be able to cover this whole in one episode, and we will see if we can. If not, we will do it next time.
Actually, it also, you have on the third line, 66 shloka, Eka dashyam ardharatro hato viro gadrutkacha, which again, in a way, it contradicts in the modern theories, because most of the people, when you talk about it, the mention is ardharatro hato viro. So the next day has already started. Dwadashi has already started here.
Yeah, but I would not necessarily object to that in the sense, like when do you say exactly the new tithi started? Because tithi is to be decided based on what was the tithi at the day of sunrise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But something that Aditya ji you missed. I'll give you the hint. Go back to the shlok previous to it, 65, and see if you can find the blunder, the biggest blunder. Of course, the 64 is a blunder too, but 65 is also a blunder.
Falgunya.
That is what it is saying is Arjuna
Falgunya, yes.
hurt Bhishma. Fine.
Krishna Pakshe cha Saptami, and then Avashtabhyam Chaiva Saubhadra Navamyam cha Jayadratha.
What is the problem there?
So again, the dates here, days are missing here.
Correct. So Bhishma failed. So on the 10th day of the war, right?
Yes.
So Saptami. So Saptami is a wrong tithi. It has to be Mrugashirsha Shukla 9, but we will not fight that today. Yeah. But whatever tithi it is, Bharat Savitri is saying on the 10th day Bhishma fell down. On the 11th day, Abhimanyu fell down. That is not correct, right? Abhimanyu fell down on the 13th day.
Correct, 13th day, yes.
And the 14th day is a Jayadratha. So yes. Abhimanyu and Jayadratha, the relative sequence is correct. But Abhimanyu falling just immediately the next day after Bhishma is not correct. Yeah. So do you know what happens? Actually, I know the researcher. For example, our dear Dr. Manish Pandit, in justifying his 3067 BCE, and because the original claim of Raghavan or Achar, they claim that the war started on 22nd November. That creates bigger problems for them. Manish Pandit thought just magically moving something here and there can solve the problem. It doesn't. But what he did is he moved from 22nd November to 25th November. So that takes to Trayodashi. So for a minute, he was totally happy, glad, So he said, "Oh, look!" And actually, in social media, I think on the Twitter, he quoted this first verse. Okay, I don't know if I can find the tweet now, and maybe he should delete that tweet in a hurry. But Twitter has a way of saving things. So when he quoted that first verse in support of his thing, saying, "Look, Bharat Savitri is saying it's a Shukla Pakshe Trayodashi and Hemanta Rutu." What is the challenge? This is what we talk about scientific acumen. This is we talk about logical reasoning, and this is what we talk about consistency. If he is going to quote Bharat Savitri, then he cannot just quote 64 and ignore verse 65. Does that make sense?
Correct. Absolutely.
Right? So 65 is saying, so actually we have to admit that maybe there are some things which are correct, but there are many things about this that are erroneous. So if we have in the audience like legal professionals, they will know if a certain piece of evidence is shown to be suspect, you cannot selectively show something and use it for your benefit. If we show that certain witness is not reliable witness, certain evidence, certain statement he or she may be making may be truthful, but still they may not be admissible because in general or overall that witness is not trustworthy.
Right.
Okay. So therefore he quotes the number 64, but he dares not quote 65. Now it's not about his claim. I mean, his claim is gone anyways, but my point is, why is this important? Unfortunately, we don't know when this was created and who created it, because that would have shed a lot of light as to when somebody started thinking about the dating of the Mahabharata or about the specifics of certain Mahabharata events other than what is written in the Mahabharata text. So we don't know who wrote this, but we have a reason to believe that whoever wrote this, either that person had access to a totally different version of the Mahabharata, which now we have lost. I mean, that is one possibility. Or this person did not bother to read the Mahabharata text, because that person wouldn't have made a mistake that is done in number 65, like just the day after Bhishma, Yudhishthira falling away. I mean, sorry, not Yudhishthira, Abhimanyu falling away, And so Hemanta Rutu also doesn't make sense, because if you truly read Mahabharata, then you cannot escape the 92 days minimum duration of Bhishma. So many other things. Now, if you go further down, you will see that it gets back on track. The tithis are not correct, but after the Ghatotkach, then it says the next day the war continued and the Dronacharya goes away, which is correct. On the 15th day, Dronacharya went away, right? Then it talks about the Dushasan going away. Then it talks about 17th day Karna, Karna going away, and so on and so forth. And the last day it is describing as if it is a Amavasya. Now that's very clear, although that's wrong. Once you start with the Shukla Paksha Trayodashi as your first day, it's very natural that the last day would be Amavasya. Now this is in part, it's not very explicit. Why it is not explicit? Because it does not mention the specific lunar month. However, it can be inferred.
Yes.
Because we know Bharani Nakshatra is on the Shukla Paksha Trayodashi, right?
Correct.
So we have to go say 2 more days. So which is what? Bharani, Kruttika, yes, and Rohini, right? So it is a month of a Kruttika. That is another problem. Okay. Do you see?
Yes, Kruttika.
So now Kruttika, lunar month of Kruttika, is used as the month of the war. Now what is the problem with this? We know Alaksha Prabhayahina Purnimasicha Kartikyam. Even before the war began, the full moon of Kartika was over. So it cannot be the full moon of Kartika cannot occur during the war itself. Right. But that is what exactly this is claiming by saying that the Shukla Paksha Trayodashi was on the was on Nakshatra Bharani. To go around this, people have tried to do many manipulations, many gymnastics, like, trying to think of some other nakshatra. And my point is that could be the case. I am not convinced. But when they think of some other nakshatra instead of Bharani, they still cannot explain this, and it creates more problem for them. Again, Aditya ji, you will understand. Because if you, instead of Bharani, you consider some other nakshatra as the nakshatra of the Shukla Paksha Trayodasi, immediately the lunar month is going to change.
Everything is going to change.
Right? Everything is going to change. And it creates a problem. So we can go through this, but that was not my whole intention. What I want to show is the caution that every Mahabharata enthusiast must pay attention to when they hear somebody claiming something, whether it is a dating of Mahabharata or whether it is a dating of some detailed event. So, for example, if somebody says, oh, the Mahabharata war began on Shukla Paksha Trayodasi. Oh, why do you say that? Oh, because it's written in Bharat Savitri. People say, what is Bharat Savitri? Oh, it is an appendix to Harivamsha. And Harivamsha is an appendix to Mahabharata. So it is basically part of Mahabharata. My point is, I have no problem accepting this as an appendix to Mahabharata or appendix to Harivamsha. But just because it happens to be appendix to Harivamsha, but so is our Puranas.
Correct.
But if the claims of Purana do not match with the Mahabharata, and we are discussing the dating of Mahabharata, we have an onus to explain why somebody is not looking at Mahabharata evidence and looking at everything else except Mahabharata. Ditto for Ramayana. So this is our education here. Okay. So now here I have written something very important, and I'm almost done. Something that is in Sanskrit, because this is how we are also brainwashed. I'm talking of us, okay, the pro-Indic, even pro-dharmic individuals. We are brainwashed. If something is Sanskrit and it's a part of ancient narrative, we may immediately think, oh, therefore it looks authentic. No, it's not necessarily so. It's not a guarantee of its authenticity. So what does the rule of Nyaya Darshana says? The Nyaya Darshana says no claim, whether it is in some book, whether it is written in Sanskrit, whether it is written in Marathi, whether it is written in English, Latin, Greek, I don't know, it does pick other language, French, doesn't matter. Just any claim intrinsically is not valid. And this applies to all claims, all kinds of claims, epigraphs, okay, inscriptions, some Purana, some other text, some Guru. So actually I have a list here. Instead of me guessing here, let me see. So it applies to all claims. The claims of the Mahabharata text itself, we have to ensure, we have to test if they are consistent. I mean, I have shown that they are consistent based on 300 plus astronomy observations and many other observations from other disciplines. Tradition, nothing wrong in starting with a traditional claim. Nothing wrong, because that is our knowledge. It is the knowledge that has been preserved from generation to generation. But we cannot take a tradition and blindly, in a dogmatic fashion, assume that to be intrinsically valid. We cannot do that. Same thing with authorities, same thing with academia, same thing with Purana, same thing with inscriptions, same thing with gurus, same thing with researchers. Because see, if all gurus are right, the problem would be the guru might have said something in the context. But what do we do when the two gurus differ? I mean, don't our acharyas differ from one person to another?
Yes.
They might have a context why they are differing. That's a different story. But therefore, precisely for that reason, we have to go and understand the context, why they may be saying it.
Correct.
We cannot just blindly take that it is intrinsically valid. Okay. So that is at a kind of high level. I wanted to leave it here. If people go ahead, sorry.
One question I have. So Vaishampayan says that there are 150 shloka which was additionally created to give a reference to Mahabharata.
Yes.
And I do not know which book is that 150 shloka because I have not read it.
No, I have read it, but go on. You finish your question.
So that's one question, but that is not Bharat Savitri.
That is not Bharat Savitri. That 150, think of it is like an index. In our modern times, when we write a book, we have an index.
Correct.
The 150, there is a 150 verse that will come in the Adi Parva.
Adi Parva, that's right.
And that is like a saying, hey, first this will happen, then this will happen, then this. So he created it. Yes. And that is perfectly, I mean, that's a great question, Aditya. That's perfectly understandable. See, Mahabharata happened. Then after 18 years, Vyasadeva wrote it. Yes. Of course, with the help of Ganesha and all that. It took 3 years. Then some years have passed, because now the next one, that the way Mahabharata comes to us, what does it say? Vaishampayan is saying it to Janmejaya
Janmejaya.
at the Janmejaya Sarpasatra. So Parikshit is gone.
Correct.
Now Janmejaya is ruling, right? So we are talking of another 60 to 80 years,
Right.
from the time of Mahabharata war. And in that assembly, there is a Romaharshana or Lomaharshana Sauti,
Correct.
who is listening to that conversation. After that, he goes to Naimisharanya, and Shaunaka Rishi asks him, so where are you coming from? And what's the gossip? As you said,
Yes.
everyone likes the gossip. He said, what's up? Ke pasa? What's new? What's the wave? And then in response to that, Lomaharshana Sauti or Romaharshana Sauti is reciting the Mahabharata again.
Again, correct.
Right? So there he's saying, hey, look, Vaishampayan has given an index like this. Therefore, in the Adi Parva, you also see the whole Mahabharata. There are two different, or possibly more, different organizations of the same Mahabharata.
Right.
There are like sub-parvas that you come across, like a Gada Parva,
Yes.
but that is not a parva in the 18 big parvas that we look at.
Right.
So there is a different way of looking, different way of classifying the sections, and that has been done. And that 150 is part of it. But and so that's a great point, Aditya. The point I want to emphasize for many of our observers, many people from the young generation, it's just because something is in Sanskrit, just because some professor speaks in Sanskrit, okay, and people immediately feel impressed, well, yeah, you can be impressed about that person's spoken Sanskrit. That is not a guarantee of that
A lot of
person's
Rakshas are
comprehension.
speaking Sanskrit today.
What is it?
A lot of Rakshas also speaking Sanskrit today.
Of course. Yeah. So, I mean, exactly, right? I mean, in fact, that is their strategy, to speak Sanskrit.
Yes.
To achieve what they want to achieve. And I'm saying just because it's a part of ancient narrative, it can be part of some Samhita or even Puranas, or it doesn't matter. Therefore, I said including Mahabharata, because Mahabharata also might have interpolation. Okay, the rules of Nyaya Darshana says no claim is intrinsically valid, and the beauty of Indian ancient narrative is, by luck, I would say, because we cannot demand, the evidence is there in our epics. It's such a rich evidence that we have no reason to doubt. When that evidence is put together in a crossword puzzle fashion, in a jigsaw puzzle fashion, it gives us such a precise and accurate information, not about the dating, but about the geology, about the geography, about the river system, about the culture, about the society, about the domestication of animals, about the agriculture, about the currency that was used, about the clothing that people were wearing, about the shastra, about the astra. I mean, so much information is there, only if you are willing to spend time.
Right.
So, I'll stop this. So this is my books. If you are in India, from subbupublications.com, you can order online. And if you're outside India, this is from the Amazon. Okay. So anywhere around the world. And let me see. All right. So that is Bharat Samhita. And hopefully, see, we might have done a justice to it in this one episode. I don't think we might need to go into the details, unless in future we start analyzing some other claims, and we might bring some verses from Bharat Savitri.
Right.
But just as a giving of flavor, this is even older than Nilakantha Chaturda.
Yeah. And very interesting. Like many people have done summary of the same dates of Mahabharata. That means people have been analyzing it.
Very good point. Great point.
So this is also a Puru Paksh. So we did a commentary on a Puru Paksh of another Puru Paksh.
Excellent point.
So in that way, we are also enriching ourselves, but at the same time, we are understanding that how maybe their writing of Sanskrit was referring to their understanding of the dates, may not be the actual dates.
So correct.
That is a point there.
Yeah.
Like for example, in Bhagavad Puran, the Ramayana is mentioned to be 24th Treta Yuga. Which is if you look at now, it is 28th Kali Yuga of Vaivasvat Manu. And that is mentioned to be 24th Treta Yuga of Vaivasvat Manu, which is a long difference right there between there. But again, the Puru Paksha is very important there. So which because the after every manvantra, and we are talking the same manvantra here, Vivasvat Manu. But within the same manvantra, within the same Manu's period, there are 72 cycles.
Yeah.
And every Dwapar Yuga, it is mentioned that it has to be rewritten. Every Dwapar Yuga, the Vedas are rewritten because sometimes they get lost. Then again, we are referring to Purva Paksha of another Purva Paksha of another Purva Paksha, because the old Puranic stories don't stand.
Correct. And so what does this tells you is that when we are analyzing, even when we are analyzing an erroneous claim, we are doing it to enrich our understanding. Even what that person must be thinking, why he or she thought like that, and that kind of tells us. It also tells you the antiquity of these ancient events.
Correct.
Right?
One thing is, but the purpose never changes.
Correct.
So the purpose is to get out of the cycle of karma bandhana. But I see it in this way, that at least by engaging in this Purva Paksha, we're not wasting our time. We are using in philosophical research.
Yeah.
And that is also a way of getting free from karma bandhan, also in many ways.
Correct. Which is a swakarma, right? It
Swakarma.
doesn't say what karma you are doing, what varna you are.
Yeah.
Whatever karma, whatever your guna karma, you follow that. And Marathi Vinoba has translated the Bhagavad Gita verse, Swakarmi kusumi tyasa pujita moksha lavato.
Correct.
So if you, with your swakarma, you in a way do the puja of that great Bhagwan.
Exactly.
It leads you to moksha. So if somebody likes astronomy, let him do astronomy. Somebody likes agriculture, let that person do agriculture.
Yes. And we are doing this, so that it is benefiting us. And for viewers, if you are enjoying it, it's going to benefit you also. And also gives you a background on how to do Purva Paksha based on what you read. And you forgot to show that slide, my favorite slide, which you have, the 4 section.
I did show it briefly. But don't be disappointed. The next one, when we do Purva Paksha, I will show it again.
The VASP framework.
Yeah. Oh, you mean that one? That is the Yuga 4-way framework. Yeah.
But you have made this, like which quadrant which belongs to, because we have to see all kinds of evidences. So thank you, Nilesh, as usual, and it's a great show. And also, viewers, I think you don't want to leave the show because nobody's leaving it right now. So, but for your benefit, I'll give you rest of the time back, so you can go back and do comment on YouTube. Let us know how you feel. I think the last one you loved it too much. It went out yesterday, and this one will just add to your thing. Namaskar and thank you.